Thanks, Michael, and thanks to you for tuning in. Tonight's lead, America is getting smart on crime, but the right wing is playing dumb. They just can't seem to understand why a judge would rule that a police program like New York's Stop and Frisk discriminates against minorities.
You're looking at a presumption that the New York City Police Department is going out every morning and targeting young black males, all right? They want to roust young black males. And I don't believe that for a second. They're not just walking around going, hey, you, come over here, all right? They're trying to suppress violent crime, and they're succeeding.
Bill doesn't believe it. I guess he just doesn't believe the hundreds of thousands of blacks and Latino victims who are stopped for no reason. But maybe he'd believe it if he heard it straight from the police. Here's an audio tape of a commander ordering an officer to target blacks. This tape was played at the Stop and Frisk trial.
Take my neighborhood where we had the most problems.
Right.
And most problems we had there was robberies and grand larcenies.
And who are those people robbing?
The problem was what? Male blacks, and I told you the roll call, and I have no problem telling you this. Male blacks 14 to 20, 21.
The right refuses to admit this is a bad policy. No matter what facts are thrown their way, they won't admit it. Newt Gingrich was also defending the practice today.
Judges who are totally safe can make really stupid rulings, and the number one group that are going to get killed are young black males. The number two group that are going to get killed are young Latino males.
Is that right? We should stop and frisk blacks and Latinos so they don't die? For more than 40 years, Republicans have used scare tactics and racially charged rhetoric to claim they're tough on crime. But Americans don't buy it anymore. They want to get smart on crime. In November, California voters reformed the state's harsh three-strikes laws with 69% of the vote. This week, Attorney General Eric Holder announced the end of severe mandatory sentences for low-level nonviolent drug offenders. And now, ALEC, the group that created model legislation for three-strike laws, is reversing its stance on mandatory prison sentences. Being smart on crime makes moral sense. It makes financial sense. And it's time the right wing caught up with the rest of America on this. It's just the right thing to do. Joining me are Karen Finney and James Peterson. Thank you both for being here.
Hey, Rev.
Thanks, Rev.
You know, Karen, explain to me, why can't Republicans see the wisdom of getting smart on crime?
Because, you know what, if you listen to the way Bill O'Reilly talks about all of these issues, I mean, I go back to even election night when, you know, he was realizing how diverse the country is. He doesn't recognize that one blanket solution is going to have different kinds of consequences, or that laws are applied in different ways in different communities. That's not his experience. So to him, he doesn't get why this makes sense, because he doesn't see that there's an actual problem.
But the hypocrisy of saying that people should accept the law when they agree,
right?
Like they lectured us on Zimmerman, and we said we accept the verdict, but we disagree. But then he can just act like it's non-existent, and a federal judge just said, James Peterson, this is racial profiling and is unconstitutional. So you can't have it both ways. You can't act like it's non-existent. You can say, I disagree with her conclusion, but let me look at the data. But you can't just act like somebody's just making it up when a federal judge just ruled it to be so.
No, you can't, Rev, and I have some breaking news here. Bill O'Reilly doesn't care about black people. And at the end of the day, when we look at this case, the data and the facts absolutely matter. Karen and I talked about this last weekend on Disrupt, but it's strange to me how people can clearly understand the balance between privacy and civil liberties and security and safety when you're talking about the NSA. But when you talk about the real lived experiences of young black and brown men in our major urban American cities, you somehow lose that sort of concept. It doesn't even exist. So we're talking about civil liberties for American citizens. That's why we have to end stop and frisk. The data matters. The fact that there's only 1.8% of the black and brown men that have been stopped and frisked who have turned up having or hiding any kind of weapon is telling data. You know, hundreds of thousands of these young men have been subject to their violation of civil liberties. That's why the judge ruled against it, and that's why there needs to be oversight, and really we need to end it.
But Karen, while James raises data, let me give you some breaking news. Because the right keeps saying, well, the crime is in black and Latino communities. That's why we go there, and that's why they're the majority. But in the report that was considered on this case, in mostly white New York neighborhoods, blacks account for the majority of stop and frisk.
Right.
In the 78th precinct, 70% of the residents are white, but 79% of the stops are black or Latino. They're stopped at over 3/4 of the time, and they don't live in the neighborhood, and clearly not the majority of the people in the neighborhood doing crime.
Right. Well, but again, you have to be willing to look at the data and pay attention to the data. I mean, remember, this is a group of people, Bill O'Reilly and others, who were shocked on Election Day to realize that we are becoming a majority-minority country. They are holding on to many sort of old stereotypes and old ways of thinking, so they can't see through the data. So they're, you know, they don't even recognize how so much of the language even that they use in trying to justify these opinions when they're, you know, when they're trying to justify themselves just reinforces stereotypes that aren't even true anymore. I mean, that's part of the problem. If they ever were true, but the data, they can't see through that.
No, they can't see it. But let me bring it to another part of the discussion, James. Let's talk about what they always talk about, fiscal responsibility. It's costly, the stuff that they're using as scare tactics. This week, when the Attorney General talked about dealing with harsh sentencing, there is a steep price for these policies that he's ending. Take a look at the fact that in the last 2 decades, prison time is 36% longer than it used to be, and it costs American taxpayers $10 billion with a B dollars nationwide, and more than half of that amount was for non-violent offenders. Now, I don't endorse smoking marijuana or other things of that sort, but to have these crimes, now we're talking about more than half of them, to be things like people smoking marijuana, people doing nonviolent drug offenses, and we're spending this kind of money. Where are the fiscal conservatives on saying, what are we getting for this kind of cost? Why are we doing this?
Exactly. And listen, for decades now, we've been locking up nonviolent substance abusers, not rehabilitating, not getting them any treatment. And yes, it costs us more to do that than to try to get them substance abuse treatment. And so, and listen, when Anita Khan wrote about this on the Huffington Post today, $151 million in lawsuits for the NYPD just over the course of 2012. So no, this is not cost effective. It's just backwards in every way. And listen, if we really want to talk about addressing crime, we have to talk about addressing poverty and education. You want to get young black and brown men to sort of not make the choices that they make. We absolutely have to address the issues where they stand, and that's in poverty and education.
Well, but isn't it sick to say we're going to invest this kind of money in nonviolent drug users, but we're not going to invest in education, and we're not going to invest in poverty? Well, that's a handout.
It's ignorant.
But to lock people up is fine. There's something perverted about that.
But also to say that you support cuts for the kinds of programs that, not just education, but look at SNAP. I mean, other programs that we know help people as ladders out of, you know, a condition to a better life, to at least the opportunity for a better life. So that's part of the hypocrisy here that I think we need to recognize, is that on the one hand, there's this tough law and order message and everybody's got to make it on their own. But then on the other hand, there's this message about, you know, makers and takers, and sort of that, you know, that sort of judgment about what it means to maybe need some help in this country.
But that's the point. We don't We think that people should not get help with food stamps. Seniors and kids, they're takers. We don't want to invest in. We don't want to invest in preschool,
Exactly.
but we'll spend billions of dollars on a guy smoking a joint that got caught. I mean, and we call that fiscal conservatism. And let me give you Congressman Lou Gohmert. He went even further than that. Gohmert, James, went on right-wing radio Monday to claim the administration is race baiting to change mandatory sentencing. Listen to this.
They're constantly screaming about all the hate violence and all this kind of stuff. And, of course, we know that this president, this administration has done more to stir up racial tension and violence than any administration since, the 60s.
I mean, well, James, I'll let you.
What is he talking about?
I mean, it's amazing.
I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You know, this week, Attorney General Holder put down the gauntlet in many ways for how we need to begin to move forward against things like mandatory minimums. A lot of folk on the left are going to say it's not enough, but we have to start somewhere at the federal level. It's a good place to start. Yep. It's good policy. This is not race baiting. He cited the data that black convicts committing the same crimes as their white counterparts are serving 20% more time. We have a criminal justice system that is criminal, and it's criminal in its bias and its racism, and it's institutionalized. And so we have to address it at every level, from stop and frisk to sentencing to all the different disparities that we see in the criminal justice system.
Well, I mean, here's a man that saw the administrations in the 60s inciting violence. I mean, I never knew the Kennedy administration and Johnson administration incited anything. I think there were a lot of things going on, but I don't think the administration did it. And I'm no great lover of the end of the Johnson years with Vietnam, but I mean, give me a break. Karen Finney, James Peterson, thank you for your time. And watch Disrupt with Karen Finney, weekends at 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on MSNBC. Coming up, North Carolina's governor defends his radical voting suppression law. I'll show you why he's the fraud when it comes to this law. Plus, the Republicans are in Beantown pretending to regroup and rebrand at their summer meeting. But wait until you see what their idea of change is. And a sitting member of Congress just asked this disgraced rodeo clown in a President Obama mask to perform in his state. It's pathetic, and it speaks volumes of where this party really is. And what's on your mind? You have a comment? Email me. Friend or foe, I want to know. Reply Al is coming up. Republicans are desperately trying to spin away their shameless attempt to block the vote, defending blatant voter suppression laws like the one that was just signed in North Carolina. For example, the big boss of the GOP, Rush Limbaugh, says early voting is really just a form of cheating.
And this early voting and same-day voter registration are nothing more than Democrat Party tricks to aid them in cheating during elections. It's absurd. It is a bastardization. It's a corruption.
So voting is cheating when people support Democrats. Does that mean voting is only right when people support Republicans? The GOP's rhetoric on this is just ridiculous. I mean, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul says, quote, I don't think there's any particular evidence of polls barring African Americans from voting. And the man who signed the North Carolina law, Governor Pat McCrory, says he's putting up huge roadblocks at the polls in order to stop fraud.
We have loopholes in our voting laws which frankly allow people to vote once or twice or even more. We have to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure there isn't voter fraud.
Fraud? What fraud? There were nearly 7 million votes cast in his state last year, but there were just 121 cases of alleged fraud reported to authorities out of 7 million votes. That's 0.00174% of the vote. The real fraud is what Republicans are doing to the democratic process in this country. That's why we all have to fight their agenda in the streets, in the courts, and in the court of public opinion. Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, Democrat from Maryland, and a proud member of the Progressive Caucus. Thank you for being here tonight, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Reverend Al.
Congresswoman Edwards, do Republicans really think they spin these new laws as anything other than what they are, voter suppression?
Well, I think increasingly what we're seeing from the GOP is that they're actually not hiding what they're doing. I mean, they say blatantly that they're trying to, suppress the vote among African Americans, that they're trying to do that with, Democrats versus Republicans in some of these states. And so they're actually not hiding what they're doing anymore. What really is shocking is that they're laying it at the steps, for example, of voter fraud. You show those percentages, and I did the calculation too, and those are only alleged cases. It's not even proven cases of voter fraud.
That's correct.
And so it really greatly exaggerates what's going on, and it clearly is an attempt to hold down Democratic votes, and we know that a majority of African Americans and Latinos are voting for Democrats.
Interesting you bring that up, because North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory, he was asked about voter suppression and whether the laws favor Republicans, and listen to what he said.
When people hear this, they're going to be thinking, well, if you make people have a photo ID, you're going to reduce the number of voters of color. If you don't do this pre-registration program, you're going to reduce the number of young voters. These are all good things for Republicans and bad things for Democrats.
There are absolutely no statistics to back that up. I think what you should be asking is, why would people be against having a basic photo ID?
And the answer is yes, there is data to back it up. But secondly, Congresswoman, I don't think anyone is against basic ID. We're saying we use basic ID now. Why do we need new ID? I mean, no one votes without ID. Why all of a sudden do we need these new forms of ID that they know a lot of people don't have? Why can't we use the ID we always had?
That's right, and it's also in the absence of any proof that there's a problem that needs to be fixed or solved. I mean, that is what we're dealing with here. And in North Carolina, you have several 100,000 people who actually don't have any ID because they don't drive, because they're older, and those instances, what you're saying to people is that we don't value your vote.
Right.
And I think that that is the problem with what's happening across the country. And I'm glad the Justice Department is moving forward in Texas. I want them to do that in North Carolina,
yes,
and any other state that has, put in place these laws that are really going to be damaging to people's right to vote.
And that's the real point. People have been voting for years with their ID. There's been no widespread fraud, yet you come in with a new program. It is a solution looking for a problem rather than a problem in need of a solution. And one of the people who just filed a lawsuit over North Carolina's voting suppression law is 92-year-old Rosa Nell Eaton, who has compared this new voter ID law to the literacy test she faced during the Jim Crow era. Listen to this 92-year-old voter.
Here I am, at 92 years old, doing the same battling. We need more, not less, public access to the ballot.
That's right.
At the age of 92, I am fed up and fired up.
92 years old, saying it's the same thing. She's fed up and fired up, standing there with Reverend William Barber. People are calling them out on this.
Well, that's right. And you know what? I am so proud to be a North Carolinian because, she really is fed up.
I think that and the thing about this that really bothers me is that these are the same conservatives that talk about responsibility and family values. What is more responsible than to let people vote? Then why are you putting all of these obstacles in the way of them doing the most responsible, the most civic responsible thing they could do? You say, be responsible, do what's right, lift yourself up. But if you got to vote, I'm going to give 7 different cancellation of things that have no evidence that it leads to fraud. I mean, what are they doing other than attempting to suppress the vote?
Well, and, you know, Reverend Al, voting is the real fundamental to participation in our system. And when I look at Mrs. Eaton and I see what she's been through, the literacy test that she had to go through, I mean, she remembers, you know, really when it was difficult, and now she's having to relive the same thing at 92. It really is unfair, and I'm glad the Justice Department has stepped in. And now it's time for the Congress to do our part in making sure that we ensure voting rights for all Americans.
Congresswoman Donna Edwards, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, Republicans are doing everything they can to reboot from their 2012 shellacking. But today, all roads lead back to their failure. And more evidence that Republicans and science just don't mix. The result, a very bad reaction. Good news, though, Professor Sharpton is coming back with a little lesson in the PoliticsNation lab. Next. Welcome back to the PoliticsNation Science Lab. I've got a few of my favorite experiments brewing tonight because Republicans are once again bubbling over with their hysterical denials of global warming. Just listen to GOP Congressman Jeff Miller.
It wasn't just a few years ago. What was the problem that existed? It wasn't global warming. We were going to all be an ice cube. We're not ice cubes.
Eureka! He's figured it out. We're not ice cubes. You don't even have to be a fake scientist like me to deduce that. There's also Steve King, who tried to give us his own science lesson.
I know by Newton's first law of physics, if it evaporates up, what goes up must come down. It's going to come down in the form of rain. So if the Earth is warmer, it'll rain more and more places. That means there'll be more plant growth, there'll be more photosynthesis.
I wonder what Sir Isaac Newton would say about the congressman's flawed hypothesis. And of course, Rush Limbaugh is on the same wavelength.
See, in my humble opinion, folks, if you believe in God, then intellectually you cannot believe in man-made global warming.
Really, Rush? I think if people believe in logic, then they can't believe in you. But these guys are just the tip of the melting iceberg. Over half of the Republicans in Congress deny that humans have had any impact on global warming, even though a UN panel said there's a 90% probability that humans are the primary cause of global warming. And over 97% of climate researchers surveyed by the U.S. Academy of Science agrees with that. But Republicans seem to have denying these facts down to a science, folks. Climate change is an important issue, and we need to do something about it. It looks like the results of tonight's experiments are in, and the Republicans need to go back to summer school. This has been a special edition of the PoliticsNation Science Lab.
I so wish that I had been able to fulfill your hopes to lead the country in a different direction, but the nation chose another leader.
Election night was a moment of reckoning for the GOP. Since then, they've done autopsies to figure out what went wrong. They've gone on retreats. They've rebranded, rebooted, retooled, and yet the party's in the same exact place it was on election night. No, literally the same place. The RNC is holding its summer meeting in the same hotel that served as Governor Romney's election night headquarters. How's that for symbolism? Back in March, the RNC chair vowed to turn things around.
The way we communicate our principles isn't resonating widely enough. Focus groups described our party as narrow-minded, out of touch, and, quote, stuffy old men.
You heard them. No more stuffy old men. So let's see who they got to headline today's big meeting.
So I look forward to working with you. I think this is really important for the country.
Oh, yeah. Nothing says change like Newt Gingrich. He'll really get you away from that stuffy old men stigma. Well, except for that hiccup, the rebranding's been going just great. Just look how much progress they've made.
My father had a ranch. We used to hire 50 to 60 wetbacks and to pick tomatoes.
The incidence of rape and resulting in pregnancy are very low.
How did America get so mediocre?
I think both parents started working, and the mom is in the workplace.
For everyone who's a valedictorian, there's another 100 out there that they weigh 130 pounds and they've got calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling 75 pounds of marijuana across the desert.
I have no idea.
Even at this point?
Well, I don't know. Was it a birth certificate? You tell me. You know, some people say that was not his birth certificate. I'm saying I don't know.
So much for getting the brand back together. The party's unable to move forward because of the fringe in the base. And that's why we're seeing constant gridlock, constant threats of government shutdown. It's not only hurting the party, it's hurting the whole country. Joining me now are Clarence Page and Victoria DeFrancesco Soto. Thank you both for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks, Rev.
Clarence, you know, the symbolism of this party trying to rebrand right back where it ended for Romney, pretty fitting, don't you think?
Well, it is, and their meeting in Boston reminds me of when the Republican convention was held in 1980 in Detroit. Remember that, Reverend? They said there's going to be a new urban outreach, and that urban outreach hasn't happened yet with the GOP. You know, we saw what happened with the Romney election, and the GOP autopsy itself showed that they had turned off people of color, women, single women, single white women, and others as well, and that they also had a large group of white male from conservative districts, blue-collar males who did not show up to vote because they were not excited by Mitt Romney's approach. So their problems are pretty obvious, but you're right, they haven't really made any moves in that direction of outreach.
And you know, Victoria, every time you think you see a ray of light, they make sure the clouds come in. No light here. And I'm referring to Senator Mitch McConnell. He said, and I'm quoting him, that shutting down the government will not prevent Obamacare from being implemented. Take a listen to this.
The bill that would shut down the government wouldn't shut down Obamacare. Most of it is permanent law and not affected by that.
Now that's true, and that's a breakthrough. But immediately after he said that, his office walked those comments back, releasing this statement saying the Senate GOP leader in his remarks today did not take sides in the dispute over whether to stage a shutdown confrontation. I mean, what would be wrong for the majority leader to show some leadership? One, it is not even going to impact what they want to do, which many of us disagree with, trying to stop Obamacare. And two, it would stand up to those that would risk so much for so many Americans with a government shutdown. He walks it back after saying what is true, Maria.
Well, Reverend, what he does, what Senator McConnell does with his comments and then with his retraction is just more evidence of how the GOP has been wanting to rebrand, but they just can't do it. And they can't do it because of institutional challenges, because they have their eye on the midterm election. And the fact that we're going to see a long, drawn-out primary means that these extreme candidates from the extreme faction of the Republican Party get more of a platform, get more time, and are able to pull the party more to the fringes. I also think another institutional barrier for the Republican Party especially is that the bulk of states have closed primaries. If we were to get independent voters or non-committed voters into the polls, they would help bring the Republican Party more to the middle, but that's not going to happen. And finally, obviously,
Victoria, when you say closed primaries, explain what you mean.
So by closed primaries is that when you have the Republican primary system in a closed primary, only Republicans can vote, whereas in an open primary system, independents can vote, even Democrats can vote. They just can't vote in the Democratic primary also. So that moderates the party, but we don't see many of those. And if state legislators were to change the rules and allow for more open primaries, we could see the Republican Party start to moderate more, but that has to come from the ground up, and we really don't see any interest in that.
You know, Clarence, I showed Newt Gingrich was speaking today at the big session in Boston, and he talked about the GOP obsession with Obamacare, and he went on to make a much larger point. Listen to this.
If you go home in the next 2 weeks while your members of Congress are home, and you look them in the eye and you say, what is your positive replacement for Obamacare? They will have zero answer. Because we are caught up right now in a culture, and you see it every single day, where as long as we're negative and as long as we're vicious and as long as we can tear down our opponent, we don't have to learn anything. And so we don't.
I mean, he's saying right to them, they have no plan and they're caught up on this culture of criticism and meanness. I mean, this is Newt Gingrich saying this. Even a broke clock is right twice a day, Clarence.
Well, you know, this is good Newt, Reverend. You know, I've known Newt Gingrich for years, and there's good Newt and there's naughty Newt. I've written about this. You know, naughty Newt comes out and panders to that birther vote like Donald Trump does, but good Newt is a man of ideas. That's why a lot of liberals like to talk to Newt Gingrich, because he's always got ideas. Some of them aren't great, others are not bad. And one thing he does know is that Republicans cannot just continue to vote against Obamacare without saying, what would you replace it with? Because both parties agree the nation's health care system is broken. The needs of those 30, 40 million people who have been uninsured need to be taken care of. And the Republicans have to be more than just a party of no.
Yeah. And you know, Victoria, you get a little excited when you see, wow, Newt said what is true. Because all of us want to hear some counter policy ideas. And you wait on the big idea, then the chairman of the party, Priebus, comes and gives the big idea. Attacking the president for being on vacation is his big idea. Look at this.
Are you okay with Obama being on vacation right now, considering the health of the economy?
Well, you know what? I'm not going to get into that. I mean, I think he's got a lot of work to do. You know, he's the king of golf and vacations, and I guess it's par for the course. I don't know if he cares that much.
That's a real big idea, Victoria.
Well, first of all, it's a personal punch, right? You're saying, well, it's about this person, it's about Barack Obama, rather than saying, well, I want to talk about the issues. But aside from that, all presidents take vacations because all presidents are humans. Last president, George W. Bush, he would spend a lot of time back here in Texas at his ranch in Crawford. So you can't throw rocks from a glass house. You can't criticize one president for taking time off when our past presidents have always done so. So stick to the issues, and that's what's going to give voters some hope to vote for you instead of just being negative, as Clarence was pointing out.
Clarence Page and Victoria Soto, thank you both for your time this evening.
Thanks,
Reverend.
Coming up, a sitting member of Congress just invited this disgraced rodeo clown wearing a President Obama mask to perform in his state. Pathetic. That's coming up. We're back with a pause from the political battles of the day. A time to rest, relax, and recharge. That's right. It's time for the Politics Nation summer break. And at number 3, we go to China, where they just celebrated Valentine's Day. And how about this Kodak moment? A new kind of coffee break. Couples visiting a cafe had their photo taken when they ordered a latte. And then it came out in the phone. Pretty cool. Wonder if they'll ever see this snapshot on a latte. Number 2, speaking of Chris Christie, Rand Paul says he's the king of bacon, so maybe he wants to see Omaha's Bacon Fest. There were bacon danishes, bacon pies, bacon cupcakes, bacon-scented candles, and they even had regular old bacon. The kids loved it. Uh-oh. I hope everything went okay for this guy. And at number 1, Newt Gingrich, this one is for you. Astronaut Karen Nayberg showed us all how to shampoo in space. She's keeping clean 250 miles above the Earth. First, she squirts a bag of warm water on her head. Watch out for that floating water. Then she shampoos and uses the comb. Great work, Karen. And finally, explains this picture. Now we all know where Donald gets all his ideas. Outer space. And that's today's summer break. We're back with the ugly right-wing response to that despicable rodeo clown in Missouri. By now, you've all seen it. The rodeo clown at the taxpayer-subsidized Missouri State Fair, wearing a President Obama mask and getting charged by a bull. The fairgoer who shot this video said there were clear racial overtones. Another clown played with his lips on the Obama mask. Give credit to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who denounced what happened. But moments ago, we found out a sitting member of Congress went even farther than endorsing this. Texas Republican Steve Stockman is inviting the rodeo clown to perform in Texas. He's attacking those of us who are offended, saying that something a fairgoer said compares to a Klan rally, and we're attacked for being offended by it. Stockman says, quote, "The liberal reaction is straight out of Alinsky. They want to crush dissent by isolating and polarizing anyone who questions Obama, even if it's a rodeo clown with a harmless gag." A harmless gag? Here's a reminder of what Congressman Stockman is so eager to defend.
Hey, let me tell these people about who we got helping. Obama's going to have to just stay there. Obama, watch out for those bulls. This bull's going to get you, Obama. He's going to get you.
Now, a sitting member of Congress invited the clown to his state. Speaker Boehner, you got a problem. Joining me now is Joy Reid. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
Joy, a sitting member of Congress inviting this clown to perform. What's your response?
Well, this is the same guy, Ted Stockman, who had pals around with Ted Nugent, I think brought him to the State of the Union. Look, this is another example of the Republican Party not understanding their brand problem and playing into it. This idea that it's funny to play around with the notion of a bull charging the president, he may think that that's funny, but it's patently offensive. But the Republican Party, I think, is at a stage where this sort of anti-Obama, over-the-top need to just let it out. It's almost as if they can't stop themselves and they need to get it all out. They need to get all of their offensive, angry, over-the-top anti-Obamaism out of their system, and it doesn't appear that having him around for 5 years has been enough time.
Well, their boss, Rush Limbaugh, today he tried to blame this on the president. I mean, listen to this.
This guy, Barack Obama, he can't laugh at himself, and he doesn't want anybody else. That isn't going to happen. He's above it all, folks. You don't dare. I think we're dealing with somebody literally spoiled rotten from the early days of their lives.
Spoiled rotten? I mean, they'll try to twist anything to the president. We're talking about Obama mask, where the guy plays with the lips, clearly racial overtones, talking about really violence involved. And the viewers there said it was like a Klan rally. We're not talking about just a regular mask. All presidents have masks. There's been masks on Obama before. We're talking about what was offensive.
Exactly. And they had the same reaction when there were Tea Party rallies where you had people with Obama dressed as a witch doctor, Obama dressed as Hitler. This idea that, you know, just laugh at yourself. How dare you be offended by something that even people who were white at this event saw as patently racist? How dare you take offense? You need to allow us to do this. But this is also an example of the sort of talk radioization of the Republican Party. The kind of thing that you do on talk radio, the sort of pushing the line of being offensive that Rush Limbaugh does every day, has actually taken over the political party. And the problem for Republicans is that their base is shrinking. It's shrinking in terms of its import in the electorate, and you can double and triple down on your Archie Bunker base, but that isn't going to help you. Is it okay, but how dare anyone on the other side of it be offended by it? Well, then that's fine, but you're not going to be able to appeal outside of the older white Republicans on the right.
But take it out of talk radio for a minute. Congress. Does Speaker Boehner have any responsibility? Stockman, the congressman?
Sure he did. I wish he was in charge. You know, if he was a speaker that had any power or authority over his caucus, maybe he'd do something about it. But John Boehner, as we've seen in policy matters, doesn't have control over the Tea Party caucus. And were he to stand up to this guy, were he to do what you would expect a normal Speaker of the House to do, then he would find himself in the position Mitch McConnell's in on the other side of D.C. in the Senate, where you have somebody from the Tea Party saying, well, maybe you're not conservative enough. At this stage, being conservative enough means being so anti-Obama that you yourself could host a talk radio show like Rush Limbaugh.
And you know, do credit the lieutenant governor, who's a Republican of Texas, and some Republicans came out against this, but we don't hear people like Boehner and others. When you have a sitting member of Congress, it would be good to see him do what some of the Republicans in Texas did, break rank and do, and say this is wrong.
Well, absolutely. Well, they don't have to deal with Rush Limbaugh. I mean, the reality is that the fear of the Tea Party primary, the primary from the right, that says there's nothing that's too extreme to say about Barack Obama, and you'd better not try to stop us, otherwise you're going to get a primary, that terrifies members of Congress. It terrifies people in leadership like John Boehner, who doesn't want to be challenged for his speakership. He is paralyzed by this faction on the right that is destroying what used to be a respectable Republican Party.
Joy Reid, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Friend or foe? I want to know. Reply Al next. It's time for Reply Al. Remember, friend or foe, I want to know. Denny wants to know if poor people who get a few $100 a month in food stamps are parasites, then what is the Wall Street guys that got trillions? Well, that's a good question. It is part of the demonizing and humiliating of people based on class, to make them names, to make them less than human, to make them these kind of ugly references because they need help. But we're supposed to extol and in many ways praise those who get subsidies, tax breaks, all kinds of bailouts to do trillions upon trillions of dollars that they did mistakenly breaking themselves, and we bail them out. And we don't call them names, we call them successful, who just need a way to continue to create the economic power. It is crazy language. Pat writes, why do people that don't believe in government keep on staying or trying to get in government? It is one of the most brazen contradictions of our time. They don't want big government, but vote to put me in government. If you don't want government, then let people that want government and know how to make it work go into government. Thanks for watching. I'm Al Sharpton. Hardball starts right now.